On a day which we will focus on the economy, I'm pleased to report that we have indeed halved inflation. No thanks to the party opposite. We have indeed grown the economy and we have indeed reduced debt.
Let's break this bollocks down.
We have indeed halved inflation.
Well, let's just sit on a shelf for a moment that the job of cutting inflation is for the Bank of England, not the government. So Sunak is just insulting the public's intelligence by suggesting he's the one responsible for it falling. And let's also sit on a shelf that it was this government that gave us the highest inflation in 40 years in the first place. Contrary to what Sunak keeps telling us, falling inflation is not a tax cut for hard-up families. Falling inflation just means that prices are rising more slowly than they were before. It does not mean that price levels are actually falling, so it won't immediately help the families now struggling to put food on the table. And remember this, when inflation was last at 2.5% in 2021, there were over 13 million people living in poverty under this government.
We have indeed grown the economy.
Well, imagine the shock for the Prime Minister when he switches on Sky News and listens to this.
The growth outlook is not great. It's really not great. It's a bit better. Yes, there wasn't a recession this year, but looking out into the future, election year next year, is going to be way weaker in terms of economic growth than was previously forecast. Looking out further, it's pretty grim as well.
In fact, the Office for Budget Responsibility has actually slashed its economic growth forecasts. And if that's not bad enough, this government has whacked up taxes for working people to their highest level since records began. And the cut in national insurance announced by the Chancellor today won't even make a dent in that. The simple fact is that never in living memory have families got so much poorer over a single parliament. So forgive me for not getting out the bunting and throwing a party.
And we have indeed reduced debt.
Seriously? This government has given us the highest debt in 60 years. And again, the latest figures barely make a dent in that. And just listen to this bollocks.
Mr. Speaker, it's this government that has ensured that across our country 1.7 million fewer people are living in poverty as a result of the actions of this government. Yes, that is true, Mr. Speaker. Not only that, hundreds of thousands fewer children are living in poverty.
Just last month, a shocking new report from Joseph Rowntree Foundation found the number of people experiencing destitution in the UK has more than doubled in the last 5 years. Almost 4 million people experienced destitution in the UK last year. That means they were unable to meet their most basic needs to stay warm, to stay dry, to stay clean and fed. It's a staggering 61% rise since 2019. And 1 million children are now living in destitute homes, an 88% rise since 2019. The simple fact is that 13 years of Conservative government has left millions living in poverty and using food banks. 1 million adults in this country can't even afford to eat every day. 9 million are now skipping meals and cutting back on food. And the number of children in food poverty has actually doubled in the last year. That's the reality of life in Britain today that the Prime Minister refuses to recognise.